What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2020 Volkswagen Tiguan SE R-Line. Huge thanks to Volkswagen for providing me here with this R-Line version of the Tiguan to review for you guys today. So about this trim, so this is a new trim for the 2020 model year and continues on into 2021. And so basically this is the black pack version. So this gives you the darker trim and accents and wheels and all that to go along with the sportier R-Line looks. And so it's a really nice package, and it's nice that you can get it here on the lower SE trim. You don't have to go all the way up to a fully loaded top trim to get the R-Line package like you used to have to do. And so it's a very cool look. I think this is definitely one of the sportiest looking crossovers in this segment. Just with, I mean, right up front here, you have that very aggressive front bumper, especially with the black accents. Really looks nice and bold. The only thing about this front end that isn't great on this SE trim is you have halogen headlights. They still don't make LED standard. You have to go up to the top trims in order to get LED headlights. So you're stuck with the halogen headlamps there, which look a little cheap and outdated, but otherwise, I think it's a very sharp look up front. And if you do go for those higher trims, then you have some really slick looking headlights there that look really great. But I mean, a nice bold grille and just a very squared off look here for the Tiguan, both in the front and in the back, and a very boxy look that a lot of SUV shoppers want these days. And coming down to the sides here, it's also very attractive with these black 20-inch wheels you get here on the R-Line versions. You can get 19s as well, and on lower versions of the Tiguan, you can get even smaller wheels. But these 20s are really sweet, and they have very wide tires as well, which really helps with the handling, which we'll discuss more once we hit a back road. But that's great. You also have this nice little R-Line badge here on the fender, and also you'll see the blacked out mirrors, which is a cool touch, and also all the like window trim and stuff is all blacked out. And you also see you have some side skirts here. Look, gives you a little bit more of a sportier look and less of a rugged look here on the R-Line versions of the Tiguan. But of course you can get a more rugged look if you do want that on the non-R-Line versions. And then going out to the back there, I think it's very attractive. Again, you have just a nice boxy back end there. I like the more angular looking taillights, which are pretty attractive, and a sporty rear bumper here again on this R-Line version. The only thing I don't like about the back end is you have what look like exhaust tips there, which are fake and blocked off, and so that's having fake exhaust tips isn't super fun. But other than that, it is still a sporty look. But overall, yeah, I think this looks really menacing, especially in this silver color with the black accents. Really a very sharp looking car. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The Tiguan here uses the same Volkswagen key as other Volkswagens, but it's a nice key. It still has the old switchblade thing in the back here, so you can do that for the actual key. But thankfully here in the SE trim, it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start, so you don't need that key. But it's just a few buttons there on the back and metal on the bottom here. It's a nice small key. I actually really like this key still, and so no complaints there. But yeah, so you just put your foot on the brake, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. Also, if you're interested in hearing about the interior in the Tiguan, my wife and I actually just did a full in-depth interior review on this vehicle, so I'll link that above. You can go watch that if you want to hear all our thoughts on this interior. Overall, it's a very familiar Volkswagen, so if you're a Volkswagen fan, you'll feel right at home in here. For everyone else, it's a little plain and a little underwhelming, but it does all the basics very well, and so it's just not the most attractive design, but it works well. But yeah, definitely check out that video for all of our extra thoughts on it. All right, so setting off here in the 2020 Volkswagen Tiguan. So first thing that I think I notice is the excellent visibility you have here in the Tiguan. They do such a good job. I have a nice high seating position here, and that combined with nice thin A-pillars, a dashboard that doesn't come up too high, nice large side windows. I mean, everything is very easy to see around. I mean, it's very, very good with visibility. You also have this huge panoramic moonroof, which really makes things feel a lot more airy as well with visibility. View out of the back is also really good, and so I really like all of that. Another thing though that I'm noticing right off the bat here is that at low speeds, for some reason this transmission likes to sit in like first gear, and so it can be a little bit jerky and not quite as smooth as some of the others at very low speeds, but that's kind of a nitpick. But other things here, throttle response is very immediate. It is really razor sharp throttle response, and so it just feels really responsive and eager, and I really like that about it. Brakes also have a pretty immediate feel to them too, and they have a very strong feeling to them as well, so they're very confidence inspiring, and so all those things feel really good. You have also nice light steering, but it's kind of quicker steering as well, so that also lends it to this eager feeling, and that's kind of what I keep coming back, because it feels very sporty. It feels ready to go whenever you hop in the Tiguan here, and that's something that Volkswagen does very good, even in their SUVs. I'm always impressed by that with the Atlas as well. A couple of times I've driven the Atlas. That's the same same kind of feeling where it's, quick steering, everything feels very sharp and sporty, and feels really good in that regard. So that's all very nice. This motor too, being a turbo engine, you have some pretty good grunt down low, and so whenever you're accelerating at lower speeds and stuff with lower RPMs, you do have a good amount of power, but it is still pretty eager to give you a downshift if you need it. But I'm going to go ahead and put it up into the sport mode here, and I'm also going to put the transmission into its sport mode. And let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Throttle response immediately gets way more jumpy. But anyway, here we go. All right, so it accelerates pretty well. So I had noticed that whenever I was merging onto the highway, it felt a little bit slower, but then whenever you're starting from a stop, it feels pretty good. But then whenever you're trying to do a passing maneuver, I mean, it gets up and goes pretty well, but it doesn't feel quite as quick as I think maybe some of the competitors do. But let's see, this is very competitive performance. We're running a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. It has 184 horsepower and 221 pound-feet of torque, which is actually one of the better torque figures in this segment of base engines in these crossovers in this compact SUV segment. And so it's a pretty good amount of power, but it doesn't really translate into a faster to 60 time. And Car and Driver is actually kind of surprised. They tested a few Tiguans over the past couple of years with this engine, and they got anywhere from like a 9.1 second 0 to 60 to a 9.7 second. But either way, you're kind of on the lower end of the spectrum as far as performance goes with the Tiguan here, which you wouldn't expect considering that torque figure. But you're running it through an 8-speed automatic transmission as well, and it is a standard normal real automatic transmission, which is nice considering some of the others are trying to go for CVTs more and more these days. Yeah, in sport mode, this thing really feels jumpy. It's a great vehicle. I think would be kind of nice to have if you are in a hurry a lot, or if you're someone who drives with passion. You're going to probably enjoy the setup of the Tiguan, especially here in its sport mode. It is very much sporty and feels great. We're also on a little bit of a rougher road here right now. And you hear some vibration. I'm sure that's a little bit more magnified by these sportier wheels here on this R-Line version. But it's really not bad. Now this part's smoother. And there's the rougher part again. Not too bad. For this segment of vehicle, I'd say it's pretty much on par. So no real complaints there. But we're coming up some corners here, and let's see how the Tiguan handles. So this R-Line package should certainly help. And here we go, and wow, yeah, this thing is really flat with its R-Line package. So I think the big differentiator here over a lot of its competitors is the wheels and tires. So we're running these 20-inch wheels on 255 wide tires. Now obviously we're just on all-season normal hand-cooked tires, nothing sporty as far as tires go, but 255 is by far the widest tire setup you can get in this segment. Everything else, even the sportiest stuff out there, runs 235s. Nothing goes beyond that aside from this. So you are going to have some of the best handling, I think, in this segment with this R-Line package. And so that is one huge draw for this. If you are an enthusiast that wants sporty handling, you're going to be very happy with the handling of this. I mean, body control is also very good. I mean, this is typical Volkswagen. They do very good handling setups. That's why the GTI is famous, and all their other vehicles, even the Volkswagen Atlas, which is massive, even that thing handles really well and is one of the better handling vehicles in its segment too. And same thing goes here with the Tiguan. I could say handling, hands down, probably one of the best feeling vehicles in this segment. It is right up there with some of the best. I think the Mazda CX-5 still handles fantastically well and feels pretty similar to this, although that feels a little more weighty than this does. I think part of that is because the Mazda likes having a little bit of a heavier steering feel, whereas this lighter steering really lends itself to giving you a very eager dive in and turn in, and it just feels, again, just very agile and willing and ready to go. And so I really like that about it. But speaking of weight, curb weight for a Tiguan like this is about 4,100 pounds. So that's partially because this one has the 4Motion all-wheel drive system. You'd save a little bit of weight there if you went for a front-wheel drive Tiguan, which is available. But the all-wheel drive is an upcharge here that this one has. And the all-wheel drive system puts the power down very well. Now, although we are in winter here, we didn't have any snow while I had this to really test out the all-wheel drive system. But, I mean, the 4Motion system is pretty well documented with Volkswagen. It's been around for a while and, works pretty well. So I don't think anyone's going to have, any issues with the all-wheel drive. It's going to work well if you need it, and it's nice to have for sure. Now, their acceleration with the wheels turned. Yeah, puts the power down well. And it gets up and moves pretty nicely. Yeah, with this 8-speed automatic, it's not always trying to be super smooth. It doesn't mind being a little bit rougher sometimes. So it's maybe not the most refined powertrain setup in this segment, I'll certainly say that, but it's one of the best. I mean, I think it does feel really, really nice. And comparing this to some of the others, which have a little bit less power, you know, some of the other competitors, it's either that they have a CVT, they have a naturally aspirated engine, or there's some other disconnect that, you know, makes those kind of feel not quite as sporty. And I think this is definitely one of the sportier options in this segment. Again, even though the 0 to 60 time isn't great, from the seat of the pants feel, it feels pretty good. I wouldn't say it's maybe best in class, honestly. I think that the CX-5, even though it has less torque, that engine is really nice and powerful feeling, and that only has a 6-speed automatic, so it doesn't have to shift as much as this 8-speed does. And so I still think I prefer the CX-5 the way that drives a little bit, but this is still, I think, towards the top of the pack as far as driving dynamics go. Certainly more sporty than stuff like a Ford Escape or even a Honda CR-V, for example. Those have decent handling, but that CVT and that 1.5 turbo and that just isn't a great powertrain combination in my opinion. And so I think this is a lot more exciting and does a really good job of you know, making this feel adequate, you know, for this segment of vehicle. Again, nothing super exciting. I do wish they would offer more power like some of the others do, like Mazda has their turbocharged CX-5 with, you know, 310 or 320 pound-feet of torque in that. Very sporty feeling. This isn't going to feel quite as sporty as that does, but if you're okay with having, you know, under 200 horsepower, I think this is going to be one of the sportier ones in that, you know, segment of vehicle with all their base engines and stuff. So it feels really good. Certainly handling is much better than like a RAV4, for example. Much more confident than that. Very flat. It just, yeah, it's just really an enjoyable thing to take around corners. It's kind of crazy to say about SUVs these days, but they've come a long way. And like I said, the Volkswagen ones typically always have some of the best handling out there. And so this continues that tradition, and so I'm happy to report that, yeah, this thing drives really good. And now I popped it out of the sport mode, so we're just back in the normal drive mode, just kind of cruising. And this road does have some potholes and bumps and stuff, and that's one thing that I was actually really impressed with the Tiguan here, is that even on these 20-inch wheels, you don't really have a terrible ride. I mean, it's definitely going to be a little firmer than if you were on smaller wheels and tires, but it's really not bad. So I know sometimes whenever you go up the massive wheels in a lot of other vehicles, you know, it really does ruin the ride quality. But in this, it's really not too bad. I mean, yes, it's going to be sportier for sure, you know, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised if you test drive one of these with these 20s. It's really, you know, still a pretty comfortable ride, all things considered, for this segment of vehicle and stuff. You know, again, I don't think it's the plushest out there or anything, but I think it does do a very good job, you know, with what it's working with here. Pretty refined as well, you know. In addition to the road noise not being too bad, you also don't really have any wind noise or any other, you know, extra stuff that's, you know, unrefined. You know, every once in a while I will hear an odd rattle or something, but that's kind of a Volkswagen thing, so didn't take me by surprise too much there. But otherwise, yeah, it's just a really nice thing to cruise around in. And now we're out on the highway in the Tiguan, and you know, it's still a very comfortable thing going over little, you know, grooves in the road and stuff. It soaks up very well, and it's a really nice and stable cruiser, especially on these 255 wide tires on the highway here. It feels really good cruising down the road. But one thing to mention here is the safety tech in the Tiguan. So that is one thing where this is a little different than most of the others out there. So you do have like standard blind spot monitoring, which is really great, and you do still have standard automatic emergency braking as well, so nice to have both of those. But they do let you down as far as the adaptive cruise control. So many of the competitors these days will give you standard adaptive cruise control. This does not have that, so I still have just standard cruise control here in the Tiguan. So that is one thing. You can get adaptive cruise, but it's a little bit higher up. You have to go up to, you know, top trims of the Tiguan to get that. And in addition to most of the other manufacturers out there giving you standard adaptive cruise control, some even give you a standard steering assist function that kind of helps guide you in your lane and make sure that you're not, you know, coming out of your lane too much. Whereas this is very old school, where there is none of that even offered. So, you know, some of the others will even do like a traffic jam assist thing where it will steer for you at low speeds and all that kind of stuff. No such assistance here in this mid-grade trim, but like I said, I think you can go up to the at least adaptive cruise in the higher trims. But so that's just something, it's unfortunate that Volkswagen makes you pay more for that, since everyone else gives that to you for free, you know, with theirs. And so, that's just one, distinct thing here about the Volkswagen. You're going to be missing out on some of those higher tech features you get in all the others out there. But, all the other stuff works well, the blind spot monitoring. And I mean, if you're someone who doesn't like a ton of safety tech, then maybe you'll appreciate this. And that does allow the Volkswagen to come in a little bit lower on pricing when you compare trim versus trim, because you get less of that safety tech than the others offer for you. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the review, you don't even have any kind of LED or HID headlights. So you're still stuck with halogen headlights here. Even in this one, as tested at $32,000, still has halogen yellow headlamps, which is another huge safety oversight, because I mean, most of the others out there, at least the newer competitors out there, have LEDs as standard, like the Mazda CX-5, for example, standard LED headlights, so you have excellent nighttime visibility. And so this is going to be one of the worst as far as nighttime visibility, just because you have those halogen lights. I mean, yeah, they work fine. They're still headlights, but you just have way less vision than you do with those clearer headlights you get on the other competitors. So that's another thing that you can get, the LED headlights in the Volkswagen, but again, they make you pay more for that. So basically, if you don't have an SLE version of the Tiguan, you're going to be doing without a lot of the other features that most of the competitors give you as standard. And the last two things I mentioned about the Tiguan here are its fuel economy and its pricing. So fuel economy is one thing where the Tiguan has done really well. So I've driven this vehicle 104 miles here in my week of driving, and I did a little bit of highway driving, not a ton, but I'd say maybe 20 minutes or so of highway driving, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised. My fuel economy average has been 21.1 mpg. Now these are rated at 20 mpg in the city, 23 combined, and 27 on the highway. And so to be sitting here actually 1 mpg over the city rating is kind of unheard of in my testing. If you watch any of my other reviews, I usually am like 1 or 2 mpg less than the city rating, and I did all the same type of driving in this that I do in those, and so I'm pleasantly surprised with the performance here, and yeah, I wasn't expecting to even get 20, and so to be at 21, I'm pretty happy with that. And so that actually leads me to believe this could potentially overperform its EPA ratings, depending on how you drive and your environment and all that kind of stuff. But to be in the cold temperatures here, where this engine is warming up longer and stuff, to still be getting 21, I'm pretty impressed with that. And then the last thing to mention here is the pricing of the Tiguan, which isn't quite as good as some of the others. So that's an interesting case with the pricing. So this one is kind of an oddball with this SER line with the black trim, because this one as tested is like $32,600, and at that price point, you are doing without a lot of features. Like I said, the LED headlights, also just everything in here feels a little cheaper. You only have heated seats. Some of the others will give you cooled seats in this price point, or a heated steering wheel, whereas Volkswagen makes you go up to, again, those SEL top trims in order to get those types of features. But then you have this very nice, huge panoramic moonroof, which some of the others don't even offer at any price, and the few that do offer it, it's going to be reserved for their top trim. So Volkswagen, if you're someone who loves panoramic roofs, this is one of the cheapest ways to get into one in this segment. So it has these weird niches where it's really awesome, and then the rest of it where it's like, there's a lot of stuff that's missing. Like there's no power tailgate, so you still have to pull down on the hatch to close it, and that's something that's pretty standard across the board, at least in the mid-grade trims on most of the competitors. And so for this mid-grade trim to give you that manual hatch and stuff like that, there are some areas where this just feels a little cheaper. The plastics and stuff in here also are a little less impressive. It's pretty utilitarian in here, very hard plastic and just cheaper feeling stuff. It's probably very durable, but it just doesn't feel very luxurious. And when you're spending 32 grand with a lot of the competitors, you do have some warmer and more expensive feeling interiors, I think. And so that is one thing to note about this as well. The one unique thing that the Tiguan does have going for it, though, is that you have a third row that actually is standard in the base and lower trims, but then in these higher R-line trims, you actually have to pay $700 to add it back in for some strange reason. But so anyway, you get a third row here that Tiguan, which is kind of unique for this segment. Really, the only other one that's kind of in this segment that offers that would be the Kia Sorento, but those can actually be a little bit more expensive than this as well. So this is one of the cheaper ways to get it a three-row crossover. It's going to be a tiny third row. This one does not have it, so I can't show you how well that works. But what I will say is that you're not dealing with a lot of space here, so it's going to be a cramped third row. But it is, you know, something you can use if you need to in a pinch. So that is nice to have that. But honestly, you know, that's another thing that if you are wanting an actual usable 3-row crossover for just a couple $1,000s more, you could have the brand new Kia Sorento, which gives you much more luxury. You have digital gauges in those. You have a way bigger screen than this 8-inch screen you have in the Tiguan. And you actually are going to have a more usable and roomy third row in that Sorento. And so there's a lot of those types of things where I think the Sorento is a little bit better if you do want a third row crossover in this segment. But if you don't care about that third row, you know, then that's not really a selling point here for the Tiguan. And if you're going to treat it like all the other 2-row crossovers in this segment, then, you know, it kind of loses some of its edge because, like I said, you can get some nicer features in many of the other competitors for the same money or less. Now, there are a few that are a little more expensive. For example, to get all the same stuff in a Nissan Rogue would cost you about $1,000 to $2,000 more expensive. The RAV4 also makes you put on an extra package to get heated seats, so that could potentially be a little bit more expensive, but we're talking a few $100s here, a few $100s there, you know, maybe $1 or $2 grand tops, which you could easily make up for in negotiations on whatever car you decide to get. So, you know, they're all pretty well evenly matched. It just really comes down to what you prefer as far as styling goes, as far as interior niceties and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I still think that the CX-5 is one of my favorite picks because that gives you the standard adaptive cruise, it gives you the standard LED headlights, you have a Bose stereo in the Grand Touring trim, which is at the same price as this. There's a lot of other nicer things you get with the CX-5. Now, the CX-5 doesn't have as much room. This is one of the roomier vehicles in its segment, so, you know, if you want the most space possible, you know, this is going to win out over stuff like the CX-5, I guess. But, you know, as far as, you know, everything else goes, I just think the CX-5, even these days, the 2021 CX-5 gives you a big 10-inch screen. It's not a touch screen, so you have to deal with a controller in that instead of a touch screen like you get here in this. And the touch screen is really nice to have, but, you know, so there's little, you know, caveats to all this stuff, so it really is going to come down to your preference. But I think the Tiguan is a very competitive vehicle in this segment. If for no other reason, it handles fantastically. The driving dynamics are all top-notch. You have tons of space. You have a durable interior if that's what you like. You know, it does have a lot of redeeming qualities. Personally, I like stuff that's a little more luxurious for the same money, so that's why I don't think this would be my pick or one of my top picks in this segment. But if you value those things I just mentioned, then I think this is a really solid pick and worth checking out. The last little thing to mention, though, is depreciation, which is one area where the Volkswagen isn't going to do as well as its Japanese competitors, especially. I mean, the RAV4, CR-V, those types of vehicles hold their value a good bit better than this does, according to CarEdge.com. So you can go on their site to compare all the depreciation of all these different models, but that is another area where the Volkswagen comes up a little bit short. But yeah, overall, the Tiguan is still a perfectly nice crossover. It's just nothing special, nothing super exciting in my opinion, and I just wish they would do a little bit more. And I know they're probably, you know, due for a new version of the Tiguan here in a few more years, and hopefully that'll come out with something that's, you know, a little bit more competitive. And I think if you do go up for one of those SEL trims, you know, you get some very impressive stuff like digital gauges. You can get a more exciting color combo than just the black or the grays you can get in most of the other trims. So there are some of those things, but then you're looking at, you know, almost $40,000 for one of those fully loaded SEL premiums, and at that price point, then there's a lot of nicer stuff you can get at 40 grand, and that's way above most of the other competitors in this segment. So yeah, it's kind of just an interesting position the way the pricing is here in the Volkswagen. That's the only thing that kind of holds it back a little bit. But otherwise, I think the Tiguan is a really great choice. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on the Tiguan in the comments below. Huge thanks to Volkswagen for providing me here with the Tiguan to review for you guys. And yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.